I'm Ethan Wong, and today I'm here with Kari Gunter-Seymour.
Well, hi. Hi, Ethan.
Hello.
It's nice to be here.
All right, let's go straight into the questions then. So I just wanted
Sure.
to start off with saying that, well, I'm just curious on your perspective because you hear a lot of different things from different poets. How did you start writing poetry?
Oh my goodness, it's kind of a long story, but I make it short. I was journaling. I had a life-altering event happening, and I started journaling to try to deal with it, as well as huge amounts of exercise and other tension relievers. And as I was journaling, I started sharing with people that I was journaling, and someone said, and I feel so badly, I don't remember exactly who, you ought to try poetry because poetry really makes you focus in. You got to find the perfect word. Every single word needs to be perfect. And it's a discipline that really makes you sink into it. So, first of all, journaling or any kind of writing, just getting that out of your head and onto the page helps you organize your chaos, right? Because when it's still in your head, you have that little person that lives in there with you who's constantly critical, your internal critic that's always talking to you. So when you get it out on the page, you at least get rid of your internal critic. So then when you, let's just say you're free writing as if you were journaling, and then you turn around and take that free write and start turning it into poetry, that's when the healing begins. That's when you really are able to just wrap your mind around exactly what it is you're trying to say. And for me, that's why I do it. It's about healing. It's about um, overall good feelings in myself. It's a way to get things out of myself that might continue to niggle at me. So now I'm compelled. I just don't have a choice. I mean, I have to write. I have to write poetry. So I'm sure you feel the same way, Ethan. I'm sure that it's the same for you, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, yeah, I definitely think you're right. And I think a big part of it is just that when you're feeling very emotional about something, there is just this bundle of feelings inside, and you don't really know how to pick out any of them. But when you write about it, it's almost as if you're forced to kind of zero in on at least one group of things that you're specifically feeling. And as you write them out onto the page, at least for me personally, sort of target what it is that's really bothering me, and that kind of comes out on the page, and then I can start kind of confronting it at least mentally.
Yes. Yes. Agree, agree, agree.
So speaking of then, with all of this like therapeutical side of poetry, what are the sort of stories you end up telling through your poetry generally, themes or common subjects?
Well, the first publication I did was a chapbook. It's called Serving. And so I wrote all about what it feels like to be a military mother. So these were very highly emotional stories about what I was feeling and going through as a family member participated in his deployments to the Middle East. Um, and from there, I started writing about my people. And that's my second publication, A Place So Deep Inside America It Can't Be Seen. And this is a book full of, for lack of a better word, stories about a lot of the people in my life, living and dead. So a lot of ancestry, a lot of, obviously you've noticed the twang in my voice. And I am Appalachian. I'm from southeastern Ohio, which some people don't realize Ohio is part of Appalachia proper. We're considered central Appalachia. And I grew up near my grandparents' farm. And so I have a different outlook on life many times, having been raised, on the farm, so to speak. And so that's where a lot of my stories come from. My life experiences, my ancestors' experiences, because I've been able to do a good bit of research on my ancestors, and also everyday life. We observe people, and through those observations, oftentimes a story comes forward, right? So, like most people, that's what I do. I write very strongly from a sense of place, probably more than a lot of people do. Most people who read my work figure out pretty early on that I come from a designated culture, and in my case, the culture is Appalachian.
Yeah, and I just want to follow up with that. With all of these different ideas of stories, uh, through ancestry, through common day occurrences, or whatever it is that can serve as kind of fuel for that, how do you end up tying them together into cohesive parts? Because there are so many little things and bits to pick from. What's your process for turning that into a single thing?
Wow, I don't even know how to answer that really, because to tell you the truth, most of the time, my poems, I call it, they're given to me. I sit down to write, and usually I can sit down and revise anytime I want, but I can't always sit down to write anytime I want. I have to wait until it comes to me. And sometimes it only comes, the first part of it maybe, and I have to put it away for a while. And I know everybody experiences this, but lots of times my poems come to me as a first, middle, and end, and then I just have to fill in the spots, but I have to wait for them to come. So I stew on them, I think, is what happens for quite a long while. And so putting those pieces and parts together, I think, is something that I do when my brain is not actively thinking about it. And I hope I'm answering your question. I think in the background, my brain's all the time going, well, then there's that story about the bobcat. And yeah, you did see that bobcat. Now, what does that remind you of? And that's all going on behind the scenes of my active brain, which, as Poet Laureate of Ohio, I am constantly online reading or teaching workshops, or visiting with folks, participating in all kinds of activities. And so I think that's all going on in the background. So when I can quiet my mind and find quiet time to actually sit down to write, it all just kind of comes spilling out most times. Not necessarily in order or well ordered, but it does come, and I'm lucky.
No, I definitely know what you mean with having to wait for it to come, or it just popping out a little bit at a time every time you come and write a poem, especially about something with longer subjects. You have to wait for all the bits and pieces to sort of fall into order.
Yes.
And so, with that kind of process that you've just described to me, what happens when you feel the need to write, but you don't have those bits and pieces like falling into order? Is there anything special you try to do to speed up the process or get there?
Oh, that's when I put on my tennis shoes and go out and have a big old long run. There's nothing for me that clears my mind better than just getting out in nature, jogging a little bit. Well, obviously at my age, I'm not running full force or anything, but I'm jogging, and yeah, that's what does it for me. Just getting my blood pressure up. Um, when you run, at some point you just kind of forget. It's all about just your feet moving, and the air, and the breath in your lungs, and what you're seeing in front of you. And I'm so lucky. I live rurally, so I see beautiful things no matter what time of the year I run. Of course, right now it's just so lush and rich and green here in southeastern Ohio. And I mean, it's just a joy to get out and do that. And even in the winter, of course, I probably don't jog as much in the winter because it's not necessarily safe, because it gets icy and snowy here. But I do love to walk in the winter, and the icy cold, the winds, the sky. Oh, the skies here in the winter. So that's what does it for me. Is I can't force it. I just have to try to loosen myself up enough to make it happen. And so I try to do that in between things. If I have meetings or whatever, if nothing else, I make sure I have a little bit of time to get out in nature, just to let my brain relax a little bit, so that those things can come.
Yeah, definitely. I think one habit I picked up is whenever I feel like I want to write, but I'm very clearly getting into sort of a mental block with it, I just go outside for a walk. It usually works best at night. There's not a lot of people around, and I can just kind of sit in my own thoughts for a bit. And it usually comes to me relatively easily once I get out there.
Yeah. One other little hint I have for when I get a mental block or just can't seem to write is I make lists. Just I'll pick something, maybe even it's just on my desk and start writing a list about it. And it can be something mundane. Like I have this light, these are one of those little lights that you can add some extra light to yourself when you're online. And so I might start writing about that. And I might say, put white, wiggly, uh, you know, shiny. And then from that, what do I know of in my mind or mine experience that is white and wiggly and shiny? And first thing that came to my head as I started doing that was um, a person, who throws their baton and marches. And, because in my day, they wore white boots, shiny patent leather white boots, and they wore little white pleated skirts, and they were shiny and beautiful, and they throw their baton in the air. And so a majorette came to my mind, just like that, just from making a list. So that's just another thought for, dealing with that mental block.
Yeah, there are some exercises or just various thinking processes you can try to adopt when it comes to that. So, through all of this, I'm sure reading poetry was a big part of first getting into it for you. But what were your influences? And eventually, from those influences, how do you think you developed a style of your own and you could feel you were separate enough from your influences at that point?
Well, I got to be perfectly honest. I hear more poetry than I read. And that's kind of been the case all along because I enjoy that so much. Now, one of my early influences, of course, was James Wright. And if you look him up, you'll find that he's one of our, superb Appalachian poets. And I love Ross Gay. If we're going to look at, modern poetry, Rebecca Gale Howe, who happens to be another Appalachian poet, and Ross Gay, was from here in Youngstown, I believe, in Ohio. Um, but I don't know, honestly, since my education background, I have an undergrad in graphic arts, so I have a BFA in graphic arts, and then my master's is in commercial photography. So I am not an academically trained poet. So I got to be honest with you, Ethan. I don't think I worried about my voice and whether my voice had reached a level that was uh, different or had moved on from my influences. I think I just started writing. And as I grew and the more I heard and the more, sometimes I feel so pressured to write what's important to me about my people and my culture, and that people understand that the stereotype they have of Appalachians is just not true. It just is not true. Of course, some Appalachians fit that stereotype, just as many other people in our country fit stereotypes of some kind, but that doesn't mean that that's all they are, right? We are so much more than that stereotype. Um, and so that became so important to me. I think that's what set me aside is my non-confrontational sense of equal justice and sort of tackling racial inequality um, just through my work, just through my words, without getting in people's faces, but bringing it up and kind of asking people to look at it and accept that maybe they are a little bit prejudiced or might have in their minds some stereotypical thoughts toward my people and my culture.
Yeah, I definitely think that you make a good point about not worrying too much about necessarily being different, especially when you're just getting started. I mean, I think this is a thing where almost everyone starts off writing anything by copying someone else. And that's not a bad thing. That's just how it is. So I think it really makes sense to just write about what's important to you and you'll figure it out, right?
Exactly, exactly. And you'll start using your own words. That's what lots of times I write a whole poem, and I know you do this too, everybody does. And you set it away for a while and you come back to it. And that's when you start looking at every single word. And I think as you grow as a writer, um, you have certain words that you know are your own. I mean, you probably, I shouldn't say this because I'm judging you by saying this, but you probably don't use the word fixin'. I'm fixing to go. I'm fixing to make something. I'm fixing to make a cake. You likely don't use that word, but my people do all the time. And so that's a word you would find in my poetry, right? That sets me aside from others, though maybe not others who are also Appalachian. But also different areas of Appalachia use different colloquialisms. And so the idea of properly using a colloquialism that, that is part of your genre or your style of writing or your culture, I think is very appropriate for setting one aside within their writing.
Yeah, and I wanted to kind of branch off out of that and on a different kind of topic. So, as someone who clearly has experience at this point with being an educator of poetry, right? What do you think is the most important thing that you would, or what are some patterns in people who are aspiring to start writing poetry or people who are continuing to write poetry that you think are important to point out, or like whether good or bad?
Well, I mean, my advice to anybody is write what you know. So I think it's very wise to start from your sense of place, because what do you know better than your sense of place, right? So if you start with that as the groundwork, any research you want to do to write about a current topic or something outside your culture will still have such validity because it's grounded in what you already know or your sense of place. So if you always begin there, always begin with what you already know. Don't try to be an expert on anything else. Be an expert on what you know and branch out a little, but always come back to your center there. That's what grounds you. And that's what gives your readers a chance to sort of step out of their lives and into yours, right? You invite them in to your sense of place and you give them those details. And for instance, don't just say the bird. The bird was singing in the tree. Well, that is beautiful, but what kind of bird? What did that sound like? What does the sound, the cardinal, oh my gosh, it makes an amazing sound. The cardinal is red. What kind of red? And that sound, birdie, 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 that is so unique. And that's a cardinal. Give me that, and because I am from where I'm at, and we have billions of cardinals, I'm in Ohio, that's our bird. So when I write about the cardinal, I know quite a bit about it, right? I know that even its beak is red, I mean, all these things. It has a tuft on top its head and they make the funniest faces if you catch them, and these are all things that I know that you might not know. So why wouldn't I tell you about them, give you that insight? And then I'm going to drop some other things on you within that poem as well, because just learning about the cardinal isn't enough, I'm sure. But maybe what message that cardinal brought to me that day as I was out walking, that becomes a poem, right? And that's where some of the research might come in, is how do other people experience cardinals? That might be something that I'd actually open Google and see what people have to say about cardinals that don't come from southeastern Ohio. And I might include that in my poem. So I just really feel like what we need to do is start right here within ourselves and what we know, kind of that Zen thing, and be real proud of that, really proud of it. And don't let anybody not make you proud of who you are, where you come from, who your people are, and that all of what grounds you and makes you who you are. Always be proud of that.
I think you touched on two really good points, or mainly two really good points there, which were specificity of a poem really makes it feel close to the reader. The reader can actually connect to it on a much deeper level. And then at the same kind of time, intimacy with the author and then thus the reader. Because if the reader can feel that the point that the authors are making are deeply connected to the author at hand, then at the same time, that lends itself to more specificity and it lends itself to more connection with the reader. And I think those are really good points to bring up. If you want, we can get now to the poetry reading.
Oh, sure. I'd love to read you a couple of poems. I'm going to read the anchor poem from my book. And the title of this poem, appropriately so, I come from a place so deep inside America, it can't be seen. White oaks thrash. Moonlight drifts the ceiling as if I'm underwater. Propane coils, warms my bones. Gone are the magics and songs, all the things our grandmothers buried, piles of feathers and angel bones, inscribed by all who came before. When I was 12, my cousins called me ugly, enough to make it last. Tonight, a celebrity on Oprah imagines a future where features can be removed and replaced on a whim. A moth presses wings thin as paper against my window, more beautiful than I could ever be. Ryegrass raised seedy heads beyond the bull thistle and preen. Everything alive aches for more. So I think that's an example of my sense of place, and then I make assumptions by thinking how nature might feel as well as others. And I think we've all been in that place where we feel so totally overlooked, that we come from a place so deep inside America we can't be seen. So I share that with not only Appalachians, but everyone. Everyone has felt that way sometime in their life. So there's a common thread there. I'll read one more from this book. And this one's called The Weeds in This Garden. And of course, to us, raising food is a huge, big deal in Appalachia. That's just, we love to eat it, we love to fix it, we love to share it, and we love to grow it. And so it's very important to us. And this is The Weeds in This Garden. Long ago, I built a self outside myself. I ate what my family ate, answered to my name. But when they said, let us pray, I kept my eyes open. There is a price to be paid for resistance. Whatever you call me, I have called myself worse. Invented words made up of letters from my own name. Now the backs of my hands, all bone and strain, I think cannot be mine. Who hasn't killed herself at least once, only to grow into someone needier? Who hasn't bent with her wounds to a mutinous patch, weeds shooting up like false rhubarb, every wisp, stem, and sodden pith a testament? Who hasn't scratched at the question of what it means to be here?
Thank you. Those are great.
You're welcome. Is that good? Do you want another, or is that plenty?
We have time if you want to read another.
Okay, well, I could do a short one because I talked to you about the Bobcat, and I thought you might like to hear what I did with the Bobcat. I'm going to get a little drink of water here. So I told you, I thought, I saw a Bobcat. That's something I observed in nature. And then I started thinking about, okay, so I'm going to talk about the bobcat, but then what else would I need to tell someone about the bobcat? Not just my observation, right? Because that's not quite enough to punch up the poem. So here's what I did with it, and y'all can tell me what you think. Bobcat. Sleepless, I huddled in a rocker on the back porch, jacket zipped, hood up, invisible, or so I thought, inside the shadow of a full milk moon. She crossed just shy of the tall grass, 20 feet in front of me, lit up in creamy glow, dark spotted, huge feet heaving her up the weedy bank to the edge of the woods, ear tufts suddenly alert, head swiveling over her shoulder. I have seen that look before in a photograph of my great-grandmother, a woman stalked and caught. I have imagined her screech in the night, my own throat suddenly airless, the hairs on the back of my neck stinging, the cat ricocheting through the pines. Gone.
Wow, I like that a lot.
Thank
I think the
you.
way you use words is really nice.
Thank you, Ethan. How kind of you.
All right, are there any closing remarks you'd like to make?
Well, I'll tell you, I was just thinking, first of all, how awesome being one of the 5 national student poets for the Southwest region must be. I can't even imagine how fun and terrifying and all of that must be. And I know, like me, you have spent this past year doing things virtually, which was not the plan, right? But we rolled with it, right? And
Yeah.
we've made the best of it. And look what you're doing. This is so wonderful. And I watched one of your past podcasts or excuse me, virtual meetings, and I think they're wonderful. And I applaud you for doing them, Ethan. How wonderful to get all these voices out into the world. That's just a fabulous project. So thank you so much for having me.
All right, no problem. All right, thank you so much.